Oregon's been really good this year, and it's hard to figure out where they've been the best, so I've got somebody here to help with that.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll take another look at Oregon, Michigan later today. I'll have my score prediction, finally, for those who maybe haven't read some of the writing that I do. But that's Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus, friend of the show. Fun fact, we've been trying to coordinate this since the Ohio State game because Oregon, of course, emerged onto the national scene. But I want to just jump right into it, Max. When you look and PFF analyzes this Oregon football team, number one in the country, rolling right now, 15.5-point favorite against Michigan this week. What is the one thing, if there is just one thing, that makes Oregon so good right now?
There's not one thing. That's the thing that makes them so good, right? It's kind of like it's just a team that is just playing really well in all phases, right? They have a superstar quarterback in Dillon Gabriel, who we all knew would be a perfect fit in this offense. He's exactly that, and right now is tied with Travis Hunter for the best odds to win the Heisman Trophy right now. If you look at almost any sports book, you see a running back room with Jordan James there. It's been really, really good, and then the receiving core has been unbelievable, just like we thought it would be with Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart and Trayshawn Holden and all those guys. And then defensively, obviously, under Dan Lanning, they'll never have a bad defense. And the secondary has blown me away. They have the second best coverage grade in college football this year. The pass rushing has been really solid this year as well. The run defense has been really solid. You saw that Ohio State game, and they completely shut down two elite running backs and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins in that one. So just overall, it's a complete team effort Oregon's had this year. I think that's been a really, really impressive part of their season.
I've liked the run defense, but I have loved the pass defense. And it kind of makes my ears perk up when you say their coverage grade has been really high. And I have a defensive line question for you in just a moment. But talk about this Oregon secondary ahead of this matchup against Michigan, where I don't think the Wolverines are going to throw for 100 yards in this football game. Like, they just have been completely incapable of throwing the ball, and Oregon's been really good. Who in the secondary, by your guys' metrics, is really standing out?
Yeah, this is a lot of. Jabbar Muhammad obviously was a guy that coming into the year we thought would be a stud for them coming in from Washington. He was one of the best corners in America at Washington, and he's played exactly like that so far for them this year as well. So he's been really good. Tysheem Johnson, I thought at safety has been really good. Nico Reed at the other corner has been good. Cam Alexander has barely played this year, but when he has, he's looked pretty solid out there. And, like I said, Jabbar Muhammad's been a really, really good player like we thought he would be. So, again, it's not like a one superstar secondary either, like Michigan kind of has right now with Will Johnson. We'll even see if he even plays this week against Oregon. But it's not like that. Like, they have just guys in the secondary, and secondary is one of those places where, in the receiving core, you can have one superstar. That's really important to have stars there. Secondary, it's good to have stars, but you just need not to have a weakness in the secondary. And really, it's hard to find a weakness in Oregon's secondary right now, which is why only Texas has a better coverage grade than the Ducks do this year.
I think Nico Reed deserves a major shout out, a guy who was a player in last year's secondary on the two deep and has really solidified himself, I think, as Oregon's number 2 cornerback with Jalil Florence out with an injury to this point. He has been phenomenally good. He's really good against the run from what I've seen as well. Like, he just looks like he's found another gear. Like, he's not reacting, he is reading, and he's a much more instinctual guy, and his coverage skills I just think look really, really good. But something that I hear and firmly believe in all the time, Max, is that a great secondary can only exist if you have a great pass rush. And this Oregon pass rush has been phenomenal. And I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, so you go back to those Legion of Boom days. Yeah, the Legion of Boom was the name of the secondary, and those guys were great. But that pass rush was nasty. Guys like Michael Bennett or Chris Clemens, like there were a bunch of big-time dudes up front. What stands out to you about this Oregon defensive line?
Derrick Harmon. Derrick Harmon has been unreal this year, man. He has just been a stud in run defending and pass rushing. He has been borderline All-American candidate right now. We had him on our midseason All-American team, and Mason Graham definitely has a case for that as well, alongside some other guys too. But Derrick Harmon's been great. Jordan Burch, I know, has been banged up a little bit this year, but he's still been really, really good along that defensive line as well. So Jamari Caldwell coming in from the transfer portal, he's been really good. Mateo Uiagalelei has shown flashes this year as well. I mean, yeah, this is just a good defensive line all around, but I think Derrick Harmon has really made the leap into star status this year.
Yeah, I think he's kind of cemented the fact that we're only going to get him for 1 year. Because, I mean, I don't know how much higher his draft stock could rise if Oregon, continues along this push for a national championship level season, and he's at the heart of a really good defense. And like you said, he's been really good against the run. He's been really good against the pass. And, Jordan Burch has been out for the last couple of weeks, and there has been somehow no discernible drop-off when I watch Oregon's defense play in the effectiveness of this defensive line to not just be solid, but to make impact explosive plays and to make negative plays on that side of the ball. I kind of go back and forth, but I think Derrick Harmon is Oregon's best defensive lineman, which is crazy because Jordan Burch can take over drives. Jordan Burch has got plenty of NFL potential himself, but Harmon feels like he wins every single 1v1. Like, how high do you guys grade him?
Oh, super high, dude. He's an 84.3 pass rushing grade right now, which might not sound like elite, right? But that's actually an elite mark for a defensive tackle. So he is one of the best D tackles that we have in college football. And I think he's firmly established himself as a guy that we were like, oh, he could be like maybe a day 3 pick if he continues developing, because we liked some of what he showed last year. No, I think he's a top 50 pick in the NFL draft, if not higher, honestly. Like, he has been a really, really good player this year, and he's been one of the biggest breakout stars in college football. I mean, he borderline looks unblockable in some games, honestly, in most games, honestly. So now it's not only he's a great pass rusher, like you said, but he's a great run defender too. Like, sometimes you see guys that are elite in one area and struggle in the other area. He is just dominating in both aspects right now. And I would agree. I think he's been Oregon's best defensive player this year, honestly. And maybe you can even argue for best overall player. I know Dillon Gabriel's got a big argument for that as well. Yeah. But Derrick Harmon has been lights out this year, man. And he has been just a scary guy to block, honestly. Watching his tape, he's a massive dude. He is just one of the scariest players I think in college football right now.
Yeah, I wish Michigan's offensive line, which I think has had some ups and downs this year, good luck. I wish everybody good luck in trying to block that guy. I mean, speed, power, he's got everything, and the next year Amari Washington will slide into his place. But I got this mailbag question from Garrick, and you can always submit mailbag questions, YouTube comments, or on X, formerly known as Twitter. If you want priority access and a bunch of other perks, go become a Locked On Ducks insider. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. But Max, when you look at this Oregon team, what is their greatest weakness right now? My answer is, I guess, the kicking game, which is not great. It's not terrible, but it's not incredible. You don't have an All-American there. They go back and forth between Atticus Abington, Andrew Boyd. Like, that's where I would look. But what would your guys' metrics say?
Yeah, so I think this is a bigger issue in the beginning of the season, and it's been better now. But I think the interior offensive line is still an area I'm looking at, because the offensive tackles I have no issue with. Like, Connerly and Cornelius are one of the best tackle duos that we have in college football right now. But the interior of Harper, Lalulu, and Strother, they right now actually are 110th in PFF grade among interior offensive lines as a unit this year, right? So, like I said, it was a disaster early on in the season. It's been better down the stretch, but it's still well below average in college football overall. Just looking at the entire season grade. So I would say the interior offensive line, which honestly, I'm not saying Michigan's going to win this game, but that's an area Michigan can exploit, because I think Michigan's probably got the best defensive tackles in college football, at least pair of defensive tackles, in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I would say Graham is the best defensive tackle in college football, even with as good Derrick Harmon's been this year. And Kenneth Grant might be a first-round pick as well. They've got dudes on the interior defensive line, and that could be a big issue, because I think Oregon's interior offensive line has had its fair share of struggles this year.
Yeah, it's my biggest matchup question for Oregon going into this Michigan game. And we're going to get to more of those Michigan matchups, because the Ducks take on the Wolverines, 12:30 Pacific time on CBS. I should have looked that up before
CBS,
I had. That was
CBS, yeah.
That was all. It was CBS. I tell you what, that was almost a really clean toss to break. But Oregon Michigan talk, that is coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through the all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or agonizing overtime games because you need to have the juice. When you go to Autzen Stadium, you got to bring the energy. You got to bring the fight. Where do you get that energy from? You get it from 5 Hour Energy, of course. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of, you guessed it, energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com. Shipped nationwide. That's 5hourenergy.com. Oregon, Michigan, what to watch for. Max, you and I talked about that interior offensive line for Oregon against the interior of the defensive line for Michigan. I think it's their biggest test, but I want you to compare it to Ohio State because the offensive line questions early in the year had us Oregon fans thinking about, well, how is this O-line going to hold up against Ohio State if they've allowed 7 sacks against Boise State and Idaho combined? And then Dillon Gabriel was sacked 0 times in that football game. What are the differences between those two units for this Oregon front five?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's a great comparison because I think the Ohio State defensive line is also star-studded, right? You got Tyleik, especially on the interior, Tyleik Williams is a really good defensive tackle, and then obviously on the edge, you got JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and all that. So obviously they perform well in that game. I do think that this group of D tackles that Michigan has is better than what Ohio State has. And like I said, I think Mason Graham is one of the better defensive tackles we've had in college football in recent memory. I think he's on par with guys like Jalen Carter and guys like Quinnen Williams and stuff like that. Like, I think he's a true superstar that I would take in the top 5 of the NFL draft and not think twice about it. Like, I think he is truly a superstar defensive tackle, a superstar prospect as well. And then Kenneth Grant, I believe, is still a top 10 prospect on PFF's Big Board right now. I don't know if I would go that high like Trevor Sycamore did, but he is certainly a first-round caliber player. So you have 2 first-round defensive tackles. I don't think Ohio State, Tyleik Williams, as good as he is, he's not a first-round pick at defensive tackle, at least in my opinion. So you got 2 guys that could go in the top 20 of the NFL draft at defensive tackle, which is the one area that Oregon struggled is protecting along the interior offensive line. That could be an issue against them. This is going to be their biggest test all season, obviously.
Yeah, and that, I think, particularly pertains to the rushing attack with Jordan James and Noah Whittington, and then we've seen, guys like Jaden Lamar get in the mix, or Kenyon Sadiq will probably have a carry or 2 in this football game from the tight end position because, it's a normal thing for a tight end to be able to do is take a fly sweep and run with it. But when you look at these Oregon running backs, Max, Jordan James has kind of been the bell cow for most of the season, and then last couple of weeks, boy, Noah Whittington has really started to find his groove again. And I think that's a great thing for this Oregon backfield for 2 reasons. Number one, you can give Jordan James a break during games and keep him fresh for the 4 quarters you're playing on a Saturday. But number 2, you don't have the wear and tear that you might otherwise have over the course of a season, because running back and linebacker are probably the 2 most beat up positions by the end of the year. You have to be able to rotate those guys in. I think defensive line, that applies as well to get maximum impact. But I think Jordan James has been good, and I think Noah Whittington really started the season slow. But I'm curious what the numbers say about Whittington's performance over the last couple of weeks, because he's made some impact plays and he looks like himself.
Yeah, he does. Obviously, I think his last game this week against Illinois was probably his best game yet, right? He looked really, really solid in those games. And obviously only 9 snaps showing it, or 9 carries at least. But, yeah, he was a really, really good player in that game. So I would say that Noah Whittington has really emerged as a really good complementary piece, because I do think Jordan James is a star. I think he's a star running back that we have in college football. He's like a 90-plus rushing grade this year, which obviously is an elite mark. I love Jordan James. I love his game. But I don't care how good of a running back you have in your room. You need a complementary guy, right? Because like you said, it's the most beat up position probably in football. And you always need to have a secondary and even tertiary option at running back, just because those guys go down so easily. Now, Jordan James hopefully stays healthy the rest of the year, but even if that, like, you don't want him tired and exhausted out there either, and you have a really good number 2 running back in Noah Whittington. So, yeah, well, it was a slow start for him to start the year, but it's been good to see him kind of emerge in the last couple of weeks. And now Oregon has a legitimate ground game and one of the best in America, in my opinion.
Yeah. How do you think it matches up against this Michigan defense? We talked about the interior defensive lineman, but a rushing defense is certainly heavily dependent on what you have at that spot. But you got to have safeties who can tackle. You have to have linebackers that can read, react, and make plays. What does the rest of this Michigan run defense look like to you?
It's been really good. They right now have the 4th best run defense grade in the entire country. Only Ole Miss, SMU, and Oklahoma have better run defense grades this year.
SMU, really?
Yeah, SMU's run D has been pretty good this year. They've had other issues on defense, especially in the secondary. They've had some issues, which I think is going to be interesting this week against Pitt. But I think
fun football game. Sorry,
yeah,
this is not Locked On College Football, of course, but
dude,
that's a fun football game. ACC unbeatens.
I know ACC Network too, right? Good on ACC Network in that kind of game. It's kind of criminal. The top 20 matchup is not going to be on national television, but
in their defense, when you plan that out before the year, you had 3-9 Pitt last year and newcomer SMU, kind of a wild card. Like
it makes sense. There's some big games like Louisville, Clemson is also at night. You want that. You're not going to put that on ACC Network, right?
Yeah.
So there's some other big games too, but. Yeah, it's just if you have ACC Network, definitely tune in because that's a huge game for the ACC.
Huge game.
Going back to this, I think Michigan's run D is really good. Now, it's going to be interesting because obviously they need to rush the passer as well, which they've also done an elite job of. They have Michigan is the number 1 pass rushing grade in college football. I would say Michigan has the best D line in the country. I really do think that between the D tackles we just talked about, the edge defenders have been unbelievable this year. Josiah Stewart, I believe, is still the highest graded defensive player in college football. Derek Moore has been really good. TJ Guy's been really good. Rashawn Benny has been really good. They have like 6 guys on the defensive line that have played really well this year. It's the best D line in the country. Michigan's issue is in the secondary, it's Will Johnson and not a lot else. And the issue, especially in this game, Will Johnson might not be playing in this game. So
that would be a huge development.
Huge development. Like he didn't play last week, and there's talks about him again not playing this week. I don't know. I have no intel on that. He might not play. But if he's not playing, or even if he is out there, you need to get after Dillon Gabriel quickly because if not, they have too many weapons, and Michigan has too few very good defensive backs to cover those guys one-on-one for too long. So I think that is the biggest key for them, that their defensive line has to be the best unit on the field because their coverage grade is 80th in the country this year. Like they have a below-average secondary this year, even with a guy like Will Johnson there. So that's huge for this game. And if Michigan wants any chance at making this a close game, it's got to be as low scoring as possible. And to make it as low scoring as possible, your defensive line has to be the most dominant unit on the field.
How does Michigan's secondary compare to Ohio State's? Because that was a big matchup going into that showdown at Autzen Stadium. And I don't think you could watch that game or even look at the box score and say anything other than, advantage Oregon with Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson leading the way.
Yeah, definitely. Ohio State's secondary is much better than Michigan's, I would say. Ohio State still has the 16th best coverage grade in the country, even after getting torched by Oregon in that game, right? So, you got guys like Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs, who are 2 of the best safeties in the country, and definitely might be the best safety duo in college football. Denzel Burke, who got picked on in that Oregon game, but still has been a really good corner throughout his entire career. Igbenesson's been a really solid corner for them as well. Ohio State's got a very good secondary. I really do think that. I just think Oregon's passing attack is that good that if you don't get after Dillon Gabriel, they're going to torch anyone pretty much. So even more so for Michigan, like they need to get after him because they have a much worse secondary than Ohio State, and you saw what happened to Ohio State's secondary against Oregon. So you got to think that maybe even worse things will happen to Michigan's if they don't get after Dillon Gabriel. So that's a big matchup in this game. If they don't get after Dillon Gabriel and they don't stop the run, it's going to be a very, very long day for Michigan, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wonder how the chess match goes between Wink Martindale, the Michigan defensive coordinator, and Will Stein, the Oregon offensive coordinator, because when it was Jim Knowles for Ohio State, he was kind of daring Oregon to throw it to the outside. And he said, look, we feel really good about our guys. We're going to put them up against these Oregon wideouts. And Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart both beat Denzel Burke for touchdowns. They both beat him for long completions as well when they ran zone. Dillon Gabriel had the answers. I think Michigan is so different from Ohio State. They had a tendency, the Buckeyes did, at least in that game, they didn't blitz a lot. They felt like, hey, we can get pressure with our front 4. Now, Wink Martindale has been known to bring a lot of pressure, but you mentioned this is a great Michigan defensive line. Has Michigan been bringing those sorts of blitzes that Martindale is known for? Because I remember watching his defenses for a long time in the NFL, Max, and it was 3rd and 7. Yeah, he's going cover 0. Cover 0 across the board. It doesn't matter. 3rd and 4, cover 0. 3rd and 8, cover 0. Like that's what he is known for. Ohio State didn't do that. So should Oregon be ready for that going into this game?
Yeah, definitely. He's a guy that loves to be aggressive defensively. I'm actually pulling up the exact blitz number right now. Definitely, I know that, all right, because he's been a guy that clearly has always
Yeah.
wanted to send blitzes a lot, right? So that is definitely something you got to watch out for because Wick Martindale is a guy that does that a lot. And I'm trying to get the exact here we go, percentage right now. But yeah, he's definitely a guy that likes to blitz a lot. And I definitely think that that's something that Oregon needs to watch out for. In this one, I think Michigan's blitz rate is at 42% this year. That's 30th in the country. So it's a very high blitz rate. So that's a top 30 blitz rate in the country. You got to watch out for that. And listen, Dillon Gabriel against the blitz is nowhere near as good when he's not blitzed. And when he's under pressure, is nowhere near as good as when he's kept clean. So that is a big thing in this one as well. I think Michigan's going to want to dial it up in this game. And like I said, their only chance is really just get after Dillon Gabriel, or else if not, he's going to pick you apart.
You got a game score prediction?
Yes. What did I say? I said Oregon would win this game 30-17. I had a little bit closer than the spread. I do think Michigan's D-line has an advantage there that they could exploit and maybe make it a little bit more slow scoring. But I don't see Michigan's passing attack having the guys to just, create.
You don't believe in Michigan's ability to throw the ball forward and complete it from one guy in maize and blue to the other? What information could you possibly have to think that?
Spence, I was looking at it a couple of days ago. In terms of EPA per pass, basically just how efficient you are in the passing game, Michigan is the second worst in the country, and the only one worse than them is Kennesaw State, the new FBS school.
Oh,
So that is not. If that doesn't tell you how bad Michigan's passing attack has been, I don't know what will.
Hey, Kennesaw State just pulled one of the biggest upsets in recent memory in college football, beating Liberty.
They
How
did.
about that?
No, they killed my playoff picks. I picked Liberty to make the out of 5, which is a stupid playoff pick looking back. And honestly, want to give kudos to you because also a stupid pick I had that I was defending very much to you was Arizona. Come back in my face.
I'll take half a victory lap on that because I knew Arizona wasn't going to win the Big 12. My Big 12 title game prediction was Utah and Kansas, and they stink. They stink.
That conference rules, man.
It's so great. It is magnificently glorious. It is maybe my favorite one to cover on Locked On College Football. It is the craziest, wildest, most. I have no idea what's happening here. Who knows? Who cares? Let's just watch sort of league that you can possibly find. Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus. Max, we appreciate it as always, my man.
Thanks, Bets.
Is Oregon going to pull this off? Not the win, but something that not one, not two, not three, but 4 different people asked me about. Well, that's coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Do you like Oregon this week? Do you think Oregon's winning big? I'm going to get to my score prediction. I promise it's going to arrive eventually from my mouth to this microphone through the computer and then out your speakers into your ears. But if you think Oregon's winning, then guess what? FanDuel's the place to go. Right now, new customers can get $5, place a $5 bet, and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason, folks. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I have gotten this question from not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 separate individuals who I don't think had a coordinated effort in this particular remark. But Balin asked first. Others followed. Fun question for the pod. What do you think the odds are of Oregon pulling out the Statue of Liberty this weekend against Michigan, just like back in the day? I think it makes strategic sense given the amount of misdirection in this offense, and it feels like something this staff might do to flex a bit. And my God, Twitter trolling would be glorious to witness. Okay. If Oregon gets up by 3 or more possessions in the fourth quarter, I'll be surprised if it doesn't happen. I am completely with you. This is a staff that allows all access so that people can see behind the scenes how they operate because they want that level of fan engagement. This is a staff that put 12 guys on the field by finding a loophole in the NCAA rulebook and helped beat Ohio State for the biggest win of the Dan Lanning era and propel Oregon to a #1 ranking. This is a staff that just feels kind of cool, right? Kind of cool. Now, is Oregon going to do this when the game is in doubt? No, I wouldn't think so. I do wonder how it'll look on TV with Dillon Gabriel compared to Dennis Dixon. Dillon Gabriel is not a big guy. Dennis Dixon was a very big guy. I've actually stood next to both of those individuals, and I can assure you, Dennis Dixon had to lean down to take a photo with me once upon a time when I was in high school. Dillon Gabriel would not have to do such a thing. So it would look different. That doesn't mean it can't work. I mean, heck, maybe it works better with Gabriel because he hides already a little bit behind the line of scrimmage, and it's harder for the defense to see the ball. It could work, but if Oregon's up in the fourth quarter, first and goal, and it's 24-6, for instance, and there's 10 minutes left in the game, could I see a Statue of Liberty? Yep. You know who they'd run it to? Kenyon Sadiq. So that's what I'm going to speak into existence here. Statue of Liberty to Kenyon Sadiq with Oregon up at least 3 possessions in the fourth quarter. Could be the greatest prediction of my entire life. But no, I would not in any way, shape, or form push it past this coaching staff to pull something like that. Because, Dan Lanning had a quote the other day that he wants to be the winningest coach in the history of Oregon football. Well, that's a guy who understands the history of Oregon football, and yeah, that's a pretty iconic play. 2 plays, because there was the Statue of Liberty, then there was the fake Statue of Liberty. It was a great time. Hopefully the game looks a lot like that on Saturday afternoon. Got this question from a Locked On Ducks insider. Can you make the case for Oregon having the best defense? If not, who would you put ahead of them? Oregon having the best defense in all of college football. You can look at numbers if you want. I think because of the varying schedules, eye test matters a lot here. I still think, hot take, Georgia's defense is really, really good. I know they had a bad first half against Alabama. Remind me who Alabama's coach is again? Oh, that's right. He's really good. And Kirby Smart, I think he's got his defense figured out. I think Texas's defense is a lot better than most people might realize that haven't watched Texas this year. They can really play. They've got dudes along the defensive line. They've recruited that position about as well as Oregon has, maybe even better from a ranking standpoint over the last couple of years. So those are the ones that come to mind for me. I don't think there's Notre Dame's is really good. But I don't think there's one that is far and away above where Oregon is. I think it depends on the day. On any given day, Oregon can play like the best defense in college football. On any given day, it could be Texas, or it could be Notre Dame, or it could be Georgia. I think those are kind of the heavy hitters that I've seen. Trying to make sure I don't miss anybody, but I don't think there's anybody else out there. I'll tell you an underrated defense, though, because their team is just okay. South Carolina's defense is nasty. South Carolina's defensive line is really, really good, but I don't think they have the guys on the back end the way that Oregon does. But yeah, I think Oregon's defense, you'd be hard pressed to find 5 that I'd rather have as a unit to try and go push for a national championship right now. Which brings me to my long-awaited game prediction. So last week was maybe my best one ever. I had 38-10. It was 38-9. Not bad. Not bad. Illinois kicking 1 extra point could have given me the first time I've ever accurately predicted both team scores in an Oregon game. I haven't always had the opposing team's score correct this year with my score predictions, but I have pretty consistently been within 3 to 5 points of Oregon's point total. So Michigan can run the football, but Derrick Harmon is indeed playing, as are Jeff Boston and a bunch of other guys important to Oregon's defense. You've got a passing offense that has got Davis Warren going to Colston Loveland and not a whole lot else. I have no faith in this Michigan offense. I have all the faith in the world in this Oregon defense. The secondary concerns, if Will Johnson doesn't play, Dillon Gabriel could go for 350 yards, legitimately. But I think this game looks a lot like the Texas game that the Longhorns went in and won back in week 2. I think Oregon and Texas are in a similar vein right now with the way they play football and the caliber of rosters that they both have. I've got Oregon beating Michigan 31-6. I don't think there's a touchdown allowed in this game by the Oregon defense when you can't throw the football. I think the secondary is playing at such a high level, and there's so many guys that are playing well. I don't think you can have just Colston Loveland to throw the football to. Might see some double coverage on Michigan's tight end, leave the corners on islands. I would be perfectly fine with that sort of game plan. But, Oregon beat Illinois by a lot last week. Illinois beat Michigan 21-7 the week prior. It wasn't even that close in every respect, but that doesn't automatically mean that Oregon's going to win big. I just happen to think that is the case. 31-6, I've got Oregon. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.